Have you ever noticed how some men walk into a room and without saying a word, they command attention? It's not about their looks, their money, or even their words. It's something else, something ancient, something unspoken, a silent force that shapes how the world, especially women, respond to them. That force is boundaries. Type this in the comments if it resonates with you. Respect begins where self-abandonment ends. And if you've ever felt like you're doing everything right, but still not being seen, not being valued, then this video might just reveal what no one ever taught you. So, take a moment now, like this video, not just for the algorithm, but as a signal to yourself, that from this moment on, you will begin to embody strength that speaks without noise. There's a hidden code men once lived by. It wasn't loud, it wasn't desperate, it didn't need to chase or impress. It was rooted in silence, in discipline, in restraint. The Stoics called it virtue, but modern life has forgotten its weight. Boundaries aren't walls to keep others out. They are sacred lines that teach others how to approach the temple of your soul. When a man has no boundaries, he becomes forgettable. He blends into the noise. He bends to avoid conflict, pleases to earn favor, and eventually loses himself trying to be everything for everyone. But when a man defines his space, his time, his values, his standards, he stops asking for respect and starts evoking it. And women, they feel it, not in words, in how you pause before saying yes, in how you remain still when tested, in how you walk away when something violates your spirit. That stillness, that presence, it's ancient, it's stoic, and it speaks louder than charm ever could. In this video, you're not going to hear tired cliches or surface-level advice. Instead, we'll unlock the 5 sacred boundaries rooted in Stoic wisdom that not only make women respect you more, but make you respect yourself at a deeper, almost spiritual level. We'll venture through forgotten philosophy and timeless truths. You'll discover how Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Zeno carried themselves with such gravity that entire empires listened. You'll understand why respecting your energy, your time, your body, your words, and your heart isn't just self-care, it's self-honor. So stay with me, because by the end of this journey, you won't just be informed, you'll be transformed. The kind of transformation that makes people look at you differently. The kind that begins with a quiet power and ends with a life no longer lived on anyone else's terms. Let's begin. Thousands of years ago, long before dating advice flooded the internet or self-help became an industry, men lived by codes, etched not into books, but into behavior. These codes weren't crafted in classrooms or offices. They were forged in solitude, in silence, in suffering. Among the cliffs of ancient Greece, in the fading torchlight of Roman halls, a different kind of man walked the earth, calm, measured, and untouchable, not because he was without emotion, but because he mastered it. The Stoics, Zeno, Epictetus, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, were not immune to the storms of life. They faced betrayal, heartbreak, war, exile, but they learned that true power doesn't lie in control over others. It lies in control over oneself. And this power was guarded by boundaries, silent but firm, invisible yet unbreakable. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, taught his followers in the Stoa, the painted porch, not to crave the approval of others, but to live in harmony with reason and nature. He spoke of autarkeia, self-sufficiency. A man who possessed it didn't collapse under pressure, didn't chase validation, and didn't allow himself to be shaped by the moods of others. especially not the seductive tests of admiration or rejection. Epictetus, once a slave, became one of the most respected philosophers of his age. How? Through the cultivation of inner boundaries. He said, "No man is free who is not master of himself. That mastery begins with knowing where you end, and the world begins." When you set boundaries, you do not become distant, you become defined. And Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, ruled the vast Roman Empire not through cruelty or charm, but through presence. Even as emperor, he reminded himself daily, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Imagine that. A man who could command armies choosing to command his own emotions first. Now, why does this matter today? Because our modern world has blurred the lines between love and need, between desire and dependency. We confuse openness with overexposure. We mistake kindness for self-erasure. And in doing so, we leak power. We seek connection, but forget that no connection can be real unless it honors who you are at your core. This is where most men fall. Not because they're weak, but because no one taught them that saying no can be an act of love, that walking away can be a path to deeper connection, that boundaries are not rejection, they are recognition of your own worth. And for centuries, this wisdom was buried under empires that collapsed, under systems that favored control over consciousness. But in every age, there have been those who remembered, silent men who led by presence, not performance, men who knew that respect, especially from women, is never demanded. It is drawn, like a sword from its sheath, through the quiet enforcement of sacred lines. What you're about to learn are not just boundaries in the modern sense, but spiritual disciplines, echoes of an ancient masculinity that had nothing to prove, because it had nothing to lose. A masculinity that did not dominate, but anchored. And it is from this depth that true respect flows, not just from others, but from within. Are you ready to rediscover what was once lost? The first boundary isn't about distance, it's about presence. The kind of presence that begins with how you treat your time. Time is your most sacred currency. Yet most men give it away freely, hoping that generosity will be mistaken for value. But women, consciously or not, feel when your time isn't guarded, when your hours bend to every text, every call, every whim, not out of purpose but out of fear. Fear of missing out, fear of losing her, fear of being alone. But a man who treats his time as sacred becomes sacred. He doesn't rush to reply. He doesn't over-explain. He doesn't rearrange his world to fit into someone else's. Instead, his time follows his mission. His time orbits his values. And when a woman sees that, when she sees that his time cannot be bought or borrowed, she steps carefully. She listens more closely, because she realizes this man belongs first to himself. The second boundary is emotional sovereignty. In a world that urges men to open up at the expense of structure, many confuse vulnerability with volatility. Stoicism doesn't teach men to be cold. It teaches them to contain, to feel fully, but not bleed emotionally on those who didn't cut them. A Stoic man reveals himself slowly, like a mountain emerging through morning mist. He doesn't use emotion to manipulate or to bond prematurely. He speaks from stillness, not from storms. He shares his truth, not to be healed, but because he is already healing. And when a woman senses that calm, that quiet fire, she instinctively respects the strength it takes to feel deeply and yet remain unshaken. Then comes physical boundaries, not just sexual ones, but energetic ones. touch, closeness, presence. These are languages, and every language needs grammar, structure, rhythm. A man who knows his body is not an offering to be accepted by anyone who asks, but a temple begins to shift the dynamic entirely. He doesn't chase touch. He doesn't seek closeness as a drug. He allows intimacy to rise through alignment, not desperation. His posture says, "I know what I carry," and not everyone gets access to this temple. And now, one of the most subtle and most powerful boundaries, the boundary of agreement. Most men collapse in the face of feminine intensity, not because they are weak, but because they confuse harmony with surrender. They agree to avoid discomfort. They nod to avoid conflict. They withhold truth to preserve attraction. But here's the truth. Women don't respect men who always agree. They respect men who hold the line, with grace, not aggression. Men who can listen deeply without absorbing everything, who can validate emotion without sacrificing logic, who can say, "I see you," without saying, "I'll abandon myself to keep you." When a man disagrees without drama, without fear, without needing to be right, he becomes magnetic, not because he's trying to be, but because he's living in alignment with himself. And that alignment, that quiet certainty, is the rarest form of masculine beauty. Lastly, and perhaps the most overlooked boundary, the boundary of purpose. When a man lives without mission, his relationships become his mission, and that is a weight no woman wants to carry. Women want to feel chosen, but not consumed. They want to feel seen, but not substituted for your deeper work. When you trade your purpose for partnership, you become needy. When you place your mission above the relationship, not with cruelty, but with clarity, you become rare. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." And being one means walking the path, even when it costs comfort, affection, or approval. So these 5 boundaries, time, emotion, body, truth, and mission, aren't just tools. They're altars. And when a man builds them, tends to them, and honors them daily, the world begins to respond differently. Especially women, not with submission, but with respect. Not with control, but with curiosity. Because something deep in their being recognizes the presence of a man who does not bend to gain love, but stands, rooted, and lets love rise to meet him. You've now glimpsed the 5 boundaries, like pillars rising from the ruins of forgotten wisdom. But deeper still, beneath each one, are sacred paradoxes that hold even greater power. Because boundaries are not walls to keep others out. They are mirrors, revealing who you really are when no one is watching. Let's begin with the paradox of time. When you guard your time fiercely, you don't lose connection. You create real connection. Most people think accessibility equals love, but love without limits becomes chaos. A man who overextends himself becomes invisible, but a man who protects his time with devotion creates gravity. His absence speaks. His presence pierces. Women feel this intuitively. They don't crave constant attention. They crave meaningful presence. And that can only come from a man who first spends time with his purpose, not his phone. Now to the paradox of emotion. The world says, open up more. Stoicism whispers, understand before you reveal. Vulnerability is not the spilling of wounds. It is the art of bearing truth. A Stoic man can cry, but he does not cry to be saved. He does not collapse in the hope that someone else will lift him. He carries his grief like a sword, sheathed, polished, and never waved carelessly. And women, whether they know it or not, test for this. They push, they provoke, not maliciously, but instinctively. not to destroy, but to discern. Is this a man who reacts, or a man who remains? When a man can stand in a storm without shouting, without fleeing, without folding, he becomes unforgettable, not because he is stoic like stone, but because he is stoic like the ocean, vast, deep, untamed, and still. Then comes the paradox of body and energy. We live in an age of overexposure, swipe, scroll, consume, and yet the rarest thing now is mystery, not secrecy, mystery. A man who doesn't broadcast his cravings, a man who doesn't hover, who doesn't seek permission to touch the feminine with his energy. His boundary is not rejection. It's a silent invitation for the sacred, and in this stillness, his presence becomes charged. It says, I know what I offer. I do not need to convince you. That confidence, the kind that doesn't beg, doesn't flaunt, doesn't rush, it's ancient. Women respect a man who offers his body the way a king offers wine, with ceremony. Next, the paradox of truth in disagreement. In a culture of people-pleasing, a man who disagrees without needing to dominate is rare. A man who can say, I hear you, I love you, but I will not abandon myself to stay in your good graces. That man becomes a lighthouse. He doesn't argue to be right. He doesn't fight to win. He simply stands in what he knows, calm, unmoved. And this unshakable presence awakens respect, not because he forces it, but because he lives it. And finally, the paradox of purpose over pleasure. Most men have it backward. They chase women, hoping she will give them purpose. But the man of boundaries flips the script. He chases no one because he is led, not by lust, not by fear, but by a calling. This does not make him cold. It makes him sacred, because his love, when given, comes from overflow, not from hunger. When a woman senses that she is not your sun, but a star invited into your galaxy, she breathes differently around you. She respects you not because you demand it, but because your life commands it. The Stoics knew, true power does not shout, it radiates. Boundaries are not built to keep others away. They're built to keep your soul aligned. And when your soul is aligned, the world shifts. Not instantly, but inevitably. There's no shortcut to this kind of presence, no tactic, only transformation. Now let us leave the realm of theory and descend into practice, not with cold instruction, but with sacred discipline, because knowledge alone does not transform. It is the ritual, the repetition, the reverence for the ordinary that births the extraordinary. If you wish to be a man whose boundaries awaken respect, not by force but by presence, you must first reclaim your time. Each morning, before the noise of the world invades, sit in silence. 5 minutes, 10 if you dare. Not with music, not with your phone, just the breath. Feel it move like ancient wind through the temple of your body. Ask yourself one question: what truly matters today? Then write it down. Not 5 things, not 10, just one. That is your anchor. That is your north. Every request, distraction, or demand that tries to pull you from it is an opportunity to practice the first boundary. You're not being rude. You're being rooted. Time is your altar. Treat it like one. Next, emotional sovereignty. Begin to notice who pulls you into reaction, who disturbs your peace. Each time you feel triggered, pause. Ask not, why is she doing this to me? But what inside me is being exposed? This is the Stoic path. Observation before action, stillness before speech. Create a daily check-in ritual. At the end of each day, write, what did I feel today? What did I conceal? What did I express with clarity? Over time, this ritual becomes armor. not to block emotion, but to carry it with structure and grace. Now let's speak of physical boundaries. Make your body a sacred object again. How do you carry yourself? Are you slouched, fidgeting, grasping, or do you walk slowly? Stand tall, breathe deeply, begin a short practice, 5 minutes of stillness in front of a mirror, not to admire, but to see. Stand, look, hold your gaze. No words, just presence. You are training yourself to occupy your body without apology, to radiate energy without scattering it. When you walk into a room, do not rush. When you touch someone, do so with intention. Let your presence say, I am whole. I do not need. I offer. That energy alone shifts the dynamic. And when it comes to speaking your truth, especially in disagreement, practice in small moments. The next time you want to say yes but feel a no rise within, pause. Speak the number. Kindly, calmly. That is your training ground. Don't wait for the big moments of conflict. Master the micro-resistance. Try this phrase. I understand where you're coming from, and I see it differently. No edge, no defense, just truth, spoken with a steady heart. And finally, purpose. This is the boundary that holds all others. Each week, dedicate 1 hour to your higher mission, whether you found it or not. Read ancient texts, walk in silence, build something with your hands, serve others without asking for anything in return. These small acts reveal your larger path, not through force, but through listening. And here's a secret few speak of. When a man begins living with this level of intention, the world begins to test him. Old temptations return. People question his distance. Some call him cold. But this is the fire, and you must pass through it without flinching. Do not explain yourself to those who refuse to rise. Let your new frequency sort the faithful from the fading. You're not here to please. You're here to become. These practices may seem simple, but do not mistake simplicity for weakness. The most sacred rituals are the most understated, like a blade sharpened in silence. Start today. 1 breath, 1 truth, 1 sacred number. And remember, respect, especially from the feminine, is not something you earn through performance. It is something you attract through alignment. So now, we return to the silence from which we began. But we are not the same. You've walked through the hidden corridors of Stoic strength, and you've touched something few dare to reach. The realization that you are not here to be liked. You are here to be remembered, not for charm, not for obedience, but for the depth of your presence, for the boundaries you uphold like sacred laws, even when no one is watching. Because every time you say no to what disrespects your path, every time you choose silence over reaction, structure over chaos, discipline over impulse, you do not just shape how women see you. You shape how the universe meets you. You become a signal, a beacon, a man whose energy no longer begs, no longer persuades, no longer performs. A man who stands so deeply in himself that the world can only respect him or retreat. And that is the power of ancient masculinity, reborn in a modern world that has forgotten it. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." What thoughts have you been living? What colors are painting your presence? Have you been negotiating your boundaries in the name of love? Have you confused being agreeable with being worthy? Have you shrunk your voice to keep peace, not realizing that your silence was breaking your own treaty with the self? Now you know, boundaries are not cages, they are gateways. Through them, you protect the temple of your time, your emotions, your body, your truth. your purpose, and the paradox. When you protect that temple, you no longer chase respect, you radiate it. So ask yourself right now, where am I leaking? Where have I traded self-respect for approval? And most importantly, what boundary must I rebuild today? Type your answer in the comments, not for me, but for you. Let this moment mark the turning point, the quiet initiation into something ancient and powerful. If this message has stirred something deep inside you, if you feel called to walk the path of a higher man, like this video as a declaration, let the algorithm become a ritual fire, one that brings others like you to this space. And if you haven't already, subscribe, not just for more content, but to stay aligned with the brotherhood of men choosing soul over noise, mission over comfort, and truth over illusion. This is your time. This is your temple. And from this day forward, you do not bow to be loved. You rise and let love meet you there. The ancient path awaits. Let me know when you're ready for the next script.